OSU, or I'm sorry, Duke faced off against then number one Gonzaga. And I will say I watched this game. I've been doing not trying to advertise here, but we've been sidecasting a lot of college basketball games over on the Twitch channel recently. Real fun. You ever sidecasted sports before?
I have not, but I actually have tuned in a little bit to yours, mostly so I can do my daily flipping you off
Yeah.
from behind my computer. But it's actually pretty entertaining because it's nice to have like that additional. It's like watching sports with like a friend, like on the couch or whatever, because you're getting that
Yeah.
additional like POV.
Yeah, you're getting like, and then the chat gets going, and it's kind of like I liken it to, I'm not a big bar guy, but like going to the bar and watching sports at the bar and kind of like getting that vibe with everybody. Duke actually ends up beating Gonzaga in a close game. Paulo Banchero had a very good game for them, had 18 in the first half. I think he was well over 20 by the time the game ended. Super impressed with Mark Williams for Duke. Mark Williams was the guy on the court. Like I liked Keels. I liked Roach. Theo John showed me a little bit. But Mark Williams, the center for Duke, really is just like an energy on the defensive side for them. Still really raw offensive game wise, but they beat Gonzaga. They end up going to number one. Did you see any of the Gonzaga game and how they played for this?
Yeah, so I definitely, while I was streaming, thanks to YouTube TV, I literally not an ad. I had my phone on the charger watching the game and then dying in Warzone. But it was worth it, man. Like to me, that was one of those matches. That's why you love college basketball, right? Of seeing these like big time programs, the powerhouses, even though Gonzaga is like a relatively small school for how much of a powerhouse they are, but
they're a college basketball powerhouse, yeah,
for sure. But seeing them go up against one another and like as much as I love Duke, I was excited to see what Chet Holmgren was going to do. He didn't have a terrible game. Like I think he had like 15 or 20, I think, that night. It wasn't a massive performance for him, but you could definitely tell that Duke was doing their best to throw bodies at him, to keep him uncomfortable and make sure that he wasn't able to ISO or face up much once he got into the post. But it was so good. Banchero, I think, is just an absolute stud. Duke has a roster of dudes that are just killing it right now.
Yeah, for sure.
But that game was, as a Duke fan, that was one of the highlights more so than a recent one.
The other thing that I want to talk about from that game was Drew Timme. Drew Timme, and this actually, I've seen him do this in a couple of games since they've started playing. He seems like he's trying to do too much. Drew Timme looks like he's trying to be a superstar when he's a very, very good player, and he will get drafted to the NBA, but I saw him try to do moves on the Mark Williams down low. I see him trying to dribble drive a lot more than he really should. He's still got really good vision when he's passing, but he's not looked good for a couple of games. He gets his points. He still has some decent moves, like I said, but especially against Duke, Mark Williams essentially shut him completely down, and it was tough to watch at times. And I saw him do this in a game since that. It just feels like he thinks every shot that leaves his hand is going to go. So he feels like he can just throw it up. And I'm starting to worry that Drew Timme is feeling a little pressure from Chet Holmgren, or he's feeling pressure of them being a preseason, number one Final Four team and thinking he has to lead this team when honestly, with the way Nembhard was playing, with the way Holmgren was playing, like those guys, he doesn't need to be the number one all the time.
Yeah, my sort of rationale behind Drew Timme and the way he's been playing is that he's feeling more pressure about himself and his draft stock. Timmy's a junior, but you have to imagine, I don't think he's coming back, right? Like, I don't think he's going to come back next year because he knows he has a chance to go in the first round. I know some people were saying that Drew Timme might be lottery pick before the season. I didn't see that. I think you have to remember Timme is a junior now at this stage. Juniors, it's a little bit harder for them to figure out sort of that, especially when you're a junior who plays in the post, but also has not really a defined position when you come to the NBA. Like, does he play small forward in the NBA? Does he play power forward in the NBA? He's obviously not going to play center. And I think Timme is a very good basketball player, but he has to fit in a very specific system that is ball movement heavy, like San Antonio, for example. I think could be a great place for him to ultimately go. But I think, yes, you do have the pressure of Chet Holmgren and him leading the team and him being ultimately the face of that team now. People have started to forget a little bit about Timme, who still is a great college player. But I think it's a mix of that and then also trying to figure out your draft stock, and you don't want to be there for your senior year if you're a guy who's on the bubble of where you ultimately go.
Yeah, I still think Timme ends up being a lottery pick. I think there's going to be a team that will stretch for him. And again, I think Nembhard has really shown up for Gonzaga. I think Nembhard especially has shown that when you're talking about like Holmgren doesn't really push the offense, Timmy doesn't really push the offense. When that offense needs to go into like a next gear, Nembhard's the guy that's been doing it for them. He did it against Duke, and I think he didn't get as many chances as I would have liked to see him get.
Yeah, I think Gonzaga is going to be just fine coming by the
Yeah,
end of the year.
for
Like
sure.
we talked about it earlier. Again, the thing that helps Gonzaga so much is that they have so many dudes that can control the ball and handle the ball. Timmy, Nemhart, and then obviously Holmgren. Like those are three premier ball handlers who have varying heights and varying skill sets, but can all shoot
Yep.
to a degree. They're going to be a fine team, but I just think they have to find that I guess sort of like their identity of sorts. And I think part of that is going to be Timmy succeeding and saying, or just saying, like, hey, look, Holmgren is our main guy. I'm going to be a great Batman. It's, do you want to always try to be Jordan, or can you accept the role of being Pippen? And even though you may be just as skillful, still be able to say, like, I'm willing to take a necessary role that's a little bit lower to make sure this team is the best it could possibly be.
And then the curse of number one strikes again because Duke's next game, they come out and they're handling OSU by halftime. Okay. I will say they're handling OSU in a dirty game. It was a very sloppy game for Duke. I don't think Bencaro played particularly well the entire game against OSU, but OSU was smart. They threw bodies at Bencaro all night. Especially Liddell. Liddell super impressed me from them, especially against Mark Williams, against Bencaro, against a number of different defenders. He looked like he had all the moves he needed inside to score at will. I didn't like the way they used Ahrens in the first half. Ahrens came back, had a decent second half for OSU. Talk to me about what happened with Duke here. Was the game too big for them? I hate to say too big for Duke at this point, but they do have they are meshing some new players in there. Were they still on the high from Gonzaga? Game was at OSU, so like that's another thing too, or it was just a combination of all of this.
I think it's a combination of a lot of things, but I think ultimately you're a number one team in the nation, right? This happens to college basketball teams all the time. You're number one team. You have a lot of either underclassmen or unproven players who have been on the roster but haven't necessarily played a ton, and so
Right.
they don't really know the challenges of the potentially 30 game season that teams might essentially have. Well, Liddell is such a fun player for Ohio State. I think he's junior ish, sophomore, junior. I can't
I think
remember.
he's junior. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's junior.
But Liddell's been fun to watch the last couple of years. Like, I think he's going to help an NBA team for sure whenever he decides to declare for the draft. But Duke's issue is that they've been relying too much on Paolo. He didn't have a great game. Wendell Moore, I think, had a pretty solid game, but they had no one else in double digits. So anytime you're playing a game like that and you're on the road playing a team like Ohio State, which even though they aren't the powerhouse that they once were 10 years ago, they have still been a very good college basketball team and fighting for position in the top 25. You're going to mess up. Liddell played well for Ohio State. Zedke was killing Duke left and right. They had a dominant first. They were up by like 13, 15, something like that in the first half. And then in the second half, you can't score 23 points in the second half and expect to win many games. That's just not going to do it. And offensively, Duke was flat. But I'm happy. Lose a game like this early on the road, get a test. Coach K, I'm sure, was screaming in the locker room and then doing his passive thing and letting players know, like, hey, you messed up. We got to do better. We'll fight, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. This should be a great game, but I'm more interested in how they respond their next 3 to 5 games more than anything else.
Yeah. What do you think long term for both teams? Are they both Final Four teams, you think? Which one has the better chance, right? In your opinion, listen, college basketball is a crapshoot when it comes to, and everyone's just trying to get the March Madness, get a decent seed. And then from there, like legitimately anything can happen. It's the sport where we actually look for 12 seeds
Yeah.
to make an upset every year over fives. How do you feel about both of these teams heading further into the season?
Yeah, I mean, Duke to me has shown they can be an Elite Eight team. Final Four is tough. I think you have to hit a different gear offensively, and you can't have days off of it. You can have days off defensively and still make the Final Four, but offensively, you in college basketball, you have to consistently be there. If you're struggling offensively but okay defensively, you're not going super far in the tournament. Ohio State, I think they're a tournament team. I don't think I'd be willing to say Final Four for them. If this had
Yeah.
been at Duke, maybe it's a little bit different for me, right? If you're playing in Cameron Indoor and you're going into that environment and then winning in the way that they did, rallying in the second half like they did, I'm probably changing my mind a little bit. But I think Ohio State's definitely a tournament team. It's just I need to see more from them before I feel like they can make a deeper run past, the round of 32.
And Gonzaga Final Four, right? Like,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we're saying Final Four no matter what for them. Going to be really interesting to see Purdue at number one here.
We just
Further
talked about them.
strengthening. Yeah, I know, right? Further strengthening this whole Big Ten ACC matchups. I think it's really, really showing that the Big Ten is essentially blowing the ACC out right now.
Wild.
Forget about the OSU Duke game. Like that's a big game atmosphere, but like across the board, the Big Ten is just knocking ACC. And we talked about this earlier. It's a down year for the ACC.
Can we
Outside of Duke, like
can
a
we just
bunch
say
of their teams.
where is UNC? What is UNC
No,
doing?
completely gone. That's what I'm saying. Completely, like they fell out of the. I think they fell out of the top 25 as
Yeah.
we're talking about this. I think they got 9 votes for the top 25 in the AP top 25 right now. Ohio State, in comparison, has 75. They're going to be a top 25 team when the rankings come back out.